As we journey through the 70s, the competition to see who's the best heavy metal and hard rock, well, that competition keeps getting harder and more stiff. And the reason being is we keep seeing some of the most iconic bands, newcomers of the year, coming into the scene. Each year we see another great new band coming on, and this year is no exception. In fact, this may be the most decorated class in hard rock or heavy metal to date. Who are they? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. If you're unfamiliar with this series, we're going year by year through the history of hard rock and heavy metal, giving awards to the bands that should have won the awards that year. And this year we're in 1975. And it couldn't get any tougher than this. Every year that we've done this, we see the competition growing and growing. We see so many new bands coming onto the scene into an already crowded field. So without further ado, let's get into this exciting year. Now, if you've been watching our series up to this point, normally this is where we go to Newcomer of the Year. But I want to save Newcomer for a little later in the video, and you'll see the reason why at that point. So let's start with Best Musical Performance of 1975. All right, let's talk about the Best Musical Performance of 1975. Our first nominee, of course, the legendary Black Sabbath. Now, this is not my favorite era of Black Sabbath. While many consider this the golden era of Sabbath, and many people consider this album, Sabotage, their peak, I am not one of them. However, there is one song that stands out on this album, and it's so good. It is amongst the best Black Sabbath songs ever. And that song is Symptom of the Universe. Very heavy, very raw. I love this. It's really interesting. And to me, it sticks out like a sore thumb. At a time where Sabbath has kind of mellowed their sound, kind of gotten into progressive, this is like a big punch to the face right in the middle of it. Pure classic metal. I love it. Our first nominee, Symptom of the Universe. Our second nominee is a song you know very well. It has been everywhere. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. There is the infamous guitar solo in the middle of Bohemian Rhapsody. That is a must to have this in the category. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you've never seen Wayne's World. While this is a very operatic song, it has this big crescendo and a tremendous riff by Brian May, and it has to be on the list today. Our second nominee, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Our third nominee, Man on the Silver Mountain by Rainbow. To me, this is the Smoke on the Water from Rainbow. They have better songs. They have more epic songs. Ritchie Blackmore has, tremendous guitar solos throughout their history. But this opening riff to Man on the Silver Mountain, very reminiscent of the kind of opening riff that started on Deep Purple. This was their first song that they came out with. This was a song that let you know that they had arrived, and it is absolutely a banger. Third nominee, Man on the Silver Mountain by Rainbow. Now, guilty as charged, Your Honor. If there's one thing that I have a prejudice about, it's pretty obvious in our videos. I tend to favor guitarists. Look at the first three. I'm talking about Tony Iommi and his monster riffs. I'm talking about Brian May. I'm talking about Ritchie Blackmore. But I got to give the drummer some love here, because this is the very first year that Rush has hired Neil Peart as their new drummer, and he starts off no holds bar. Very first song on the new album, Anthem by Rush. Neil Peart is considered by many the greatest technical drummer of all time. He is going to be a consistent presence in Best Musical Performance because There's not too many people who can touch him. And we need to give the drummer some love. So, nominee number 4, Rush, with the song Anthem. And finally, wrapping it up, oh boy, one of my favorite guitarists of all time has arrived, Ted Nugent, with his classic Stranglehold. Truth be told, there is a lot of great guitar work in Ted Nugent's catalog, and there are many great guitar songs on his inaugural album. But most people consider Stranglehold to be his very best. And so we'll include it here as our 5th nominee, Best Musical Performance of 1975. And the winner is Ted Nugent, Stranglehold. Now, at the beginning of the video, I was talking about how awesome the newcomers this year were. And here in the very first category, Best Musical Performance, we have a newcomer. Yes, Ted Nugent had been around for a while. He'd been with the Amboy Dukes. This was his very first solo album, and it's completely a 180-degree turn from the Amboy Dukes. Some of the stuff on the Amboy Dukes is pretty good. We talked about Great White Buffalo just a couple of episodes back, but this is when Ted Nugent comes onto the scene and says, I am the best guitarist on planet Earth, and he proves it right here. This album, one of the great guitar albums of all time. Now, interestingly enough, the best instrumental performance that year was for a theme song to a TV show called The Rockford Files. Grew up with The Rockford Files. It's a fine show, Jim Garner. But I just don't understand what the Grammys are doing. Let me just throw something non-metal out into the universe, because the Grammys are such a joke. They just biff it in every category. Best instrumental performance. Okay, The Rockford Files. You want to go with a TV theme, a theme song to a movie or whatever, fine. It beat out the theme from Jaws. Now, I don't know how many of you were around for this, but that is one of the most iconic themes in the history of movies. Forget about 1975. When you hear that, boom, you know, shark's coming. Like, if you don't want to give heavy metal its due, fine. You want us to talk about TV theme songs, movie theme songs, fine. Then at least give it to the best TV movie theme of the year, of the decade, Jaws. What a joke the Grammys are. They can't even get instrumentals right. But having said that, Jaws is iconic, should win Best Instrumental. Best Instrumental here, though, Ted Nugent, Stranglehold, didn't even get a nomination. One of the most iconic guitar songs in the history. Guitar World has named it one of the best guitar songs of all time, and it's our winner here, not just for Best Musical Performance in Hard Rock and Metal, but also Best across the board. Congratulations. Ted Nugent has hit the ground running, and he wins our first Grammy tonight. Let's move over to the Best Vocal Performance. Our first nominee. And if you've been watching this series, you know how I feel about him. Bad Company with Feel Like Making Love. This is off their second album, Straight Shooter. And again, one of my favorite vocalists of all time, Paul Rodgers. If you compiled a list of the greatest singers in the 70s, you wouldn't get too far down that list before you'd find Paul Rodgers. And you might find him at the top. He has just the most beautiful, smooth voice in rock and roll. And he's our first nominee. Bad Company, Feel Like Making Love. For every yin, there's a yang. From smooth to gravelly, our second nominee, Nazareth, with their song Miss Misery. If you've never listened to Hair of the Dog, stop what you're doing and go listen to it. It may be one of the best vocal albums of all time. But while Paul Rodgers, smooth, silky, Dan McCafferty, he is gravel. He is grit. He has, in my humble opinion, the most unique voice in the history of hard rock and heavy metal, because nobody has that kind of gravel, that kind of grit, and it's on display. This is the heaviest Nazareth album, and it is one of the most iconic vocal albums of all time. You can pick anything on here. I sat there and struggled to pick one song amongst the many great songs on this album. Our second nominee, Nazareth, Miss Misery. Our third nominee is many people consider the greatest vocalist of all time, Freddie Mercury and Queen with Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, we've already talked about the song on their best musical performance. Now it comes in with best vocal performance. And if you've ever heard this song, you'll see that Freddie Mercury has this operatic voice through this. It goes through all the falsettos and all of the peaks and valleys. One of the most unique songs of all time. Yes, it's got an iconic jam, but it's also got maybe Freddie Mercury at his absolute best. Our third nominee, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Our fourth nominee, get used to this name, Catch the Rainbow by Rainbow, and their lead singer, Ronnie James Dio. Now, if you're not following along, Ritchie Blackmore has now left Deep Purple, one of the British Big Three bands, and has started his own band. And just so happens Deep Purple was out on tour with a band by the name of Elf, who had this at this point unknown lead singer, Ronnie James Dio. So basically what Blackmore does is say, hey, you, Elf, you all come on to, except for the lead guitar, I got that covered. The rest of you, come with me, we're going to make an album. And they put together some of the most beautiful songs in the history of rock and roll. Ronnie James Dio is my favorite vocalist. We might as well get that out here. And you're going to hear a lot about him throughout the 70s, 80s, and beyond. Our fourth nominee, Catch the Rainbow, Rainbow. And finally, the Scorpions with Dark Lady as our fifth nominee. The Scorpions have become much heavier since they first came out. We talked about how they kind of started out maybe a little bit psychedelic. The last album, kind of a mix of psychedelic. This album is really starting to be that classical, heavy Scorpion sound. And Dark Lady, the vocals on this that Klaus Meine puts together are mind-blowing. One of his best vocal performances ever. So our fifth nominee, the Scorpions with Dark Lady. And the winner is Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. This song is so iconic in so many ways. We talked about the great riff of Brian May. We talked about the great vocals of Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury has such a dynamic range. And when he puts this kind of operatic vocal performance together, he really touches on just about every range you can think of. What a great song. Now, the Grammys that year went with Paul Simon. He had an album out, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, or something of that nature. Now, if you go way back on this channel, you'll know I'm a big Simon and Garfunkel fan. But I never really cared much for Paul Simon as a solo artist. And while Paul Simon has a great voice, him and Art Garfunkel made great melodies over the years, I just don't think he has the voice that Freddie Mercury does. Especially when you really look at Bohemian Rhapsody as maybe that signature moment of Freddie Mercury's career. So let's put this in perspective. You've got the best singer maybe ever on planet Earth. This is their signature song. This is their signature moment. Paul Simon doesn't have a chance. So not only does Queen win Heavy Metal Hard Rock Vocal Performance of the Year, they're going to win Vocalist of the Year across the categories as well. And we're going to throw a bonus in here, because we're going to throw in Best Female Hard Rock Performance, because my favorite female vocalist has also hit the stage. Ann Wilson and Heart with the song Crazy on You. Now, many people will say, hey, the best heart song is Barracuda. It's well known, it's popular. You're going to hear it all over the place. Not this guy. You want to hear the best heart song? Here it is, Crazy on You. You want to hear the best vocal performance in Ann Wilson's career? Right here, Crazy on You. I love this song so much. I love Ann Wilson's voice so much. Look at that. Freddie Mercury, Ann Wilson. What a dynamic duo to be bringing home Vocalist of the Year. Now, the Grammys over on the female side picked a lady by the name of Janice Ian for a song called At 17. Okay. I'm going to confess to you. I didn't really even look it up. I don't care. She doesn't have the voice of Ann Wilson, I guarantee it. So there you go. Not only is Ann Wilson going to win Vocalist for hard rock, heavy metal, she's going to win across the board as well. What a year for singers. Like, you're beating out some of the great singers of all time and some of their great iconic songs of all time. Congratulations, Freddie Mercury and Ann Wilson, Best Vocalist of the Year. Now let's move. Now, this is the point of the selection where we pick our best song of the year. We mix hard rock and heavy metal. Just to mix it up this year, let's do heavy metal first. Our first nominee, Black Sabbath, Symptom of the Universe. The thunderous riffs of Tony Iommi, the great bass line of Geezer Butler, the great drums of Bill Ward, got to remember the drummer, and Ozzy's full throat on this one. I believe this is the last great Ozzy Black Sabbath song, and it is an all-time banger. Symptom of the Universe by Black Sabbath. Our second song is kind of unique in that it comes from the band Kiss, Come On and Love Me. Why is it unique? Because it appears on 2 albums in 1975. It comes off a studio album, Dressed to Kill, and it comes off their iconic live album, Alive. So let's go with the live version of Come On and Love Me. Most of the great songs that Kiss did on their first 3 studio albums really click in the live version. This is no exception. Our second nominee, Kiss, Come On and Love Me from Alive. Our third nominee, well, now you're messing with a son bitch, Hair of the Dog by Nazareth. We talked about this in the vocal category. This album by Nazareth is so powerful, song after song after song. So why not nominate the title track? It is iconic. It was a huge hit for them in the 70s, and it really sets the pace for the whole album. Our third nominee, Hair of the Dog by Nazareth. Our fourth nominee, I'm always a little nervous when I put a ballad on the docket for best metal performance, best metal song. But sometimes heavy metal has some of the greatest ballads in the history of rock and roll. And so we're going to go with a ballad here. Catch the Rainbow by Rainbow. You're not going to hear a more beautiful song sang than this one by Ronnie James Dio. It is absolutely beautiful, and it is an example of how you can do a heavy metal ballad justice. Fourth nominee, Catch the Rainbow by Rainbow. And oh boy, I'm doing it again. But our fifth nominee is also a ballad. It was just a great year for ballads. What are you going to do? In Trance by the Scorpions. Now again, this is another one of those categories where there are so many good songs off this Scorpions In Trance album. I went ahead and went with the title track because I've always had a soft spot in my heart for it. These are 2 of the best ballads you're ever going to hear. And metal is both the hard charging of Symptom of the Universe and the ballads of Catch the Rainbow. It's the whole spectrum, people. And the winner is I'm pulling the trigger on a ballad. Catch the Rainbow by Rainbow. Now I want to talk about this for just a split second here. Ritchie Blackmore, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, in one of the greatest bands of all time in Deep Purple. But Ritchie's getting frustrated with the direction of the band. And a lot of funky influences have been infiltrating. What Ritchie Blackmore's vision for Deep Purple was always straight ahead, good hard rock music. And that's what he does here with Rainbow. Hot take coming in when it comes to the age-old question, what was better, Deep Purple or Rainbow? To me, it's not even close. It's Rainbow. I agree with the vision, and Ritchie Blackmore, given the artistic freedom to make a band in his own image, I think Rainbow is so underrated. If you like Deep Purple, if you like Ritchie Blackmore, you gotta try Rainbow. Great stuff. Let's move on to the best hard rock song of the year. I say best hard rock song to this point because, in my opinion, this may be the most loaded field in the history of this category. 5 Hall of Fame level bands, 5 of the greatest bands of all time, and arguable that each of these songs we're going to say is their greatest song ever. That is a strong field. Let's get right to it. Our first nominee, Aerosmith with Sweet Emotion. This comes off their Toys in the Attic album. They came out of the gates firing. Get Your Wings was okay. Now they've come in with Toys in the Attic. What an epic. And really, again, there are so many good songs on this album. Many people might even pick Walk This Way, one of the not only great heavy metal songs of all time, but one of those that was that kind of brought heavy metal and rap together. If you remember, Aerosmith and Run DMC did a version of Walk This Way. So a very famous song, Walk This Way, but I don't think it holds a candle to our first nominee, Sweet Emotion. Our second nominee, Led Zeppelin with Kashmir. Now, if your opinion is that the greatest Led Zeppelin song is Stairway to Heaven, I'm not going to argue that. But what is 1A? What is 1B? Kashmir is right up there. I think this is an absolutely best song by Led Zeppelin. It's so haunting and creepy and yet kind of has, like, I don't know, almost like a little bit of a Middle Eastern feel to it. Really great song. Robert Plant's vocals blend in with the song just perfectly. Ooh, love this song. Our second nominee, Led Zeppelin with Kashmir. Our third nominee, Crazy on You by Heart. Already talked about it. This, to me, is their best song. This, to me, is Ann Wilson's defining moment as a vocalist. I cannot say enough good things about this song. Love this song to death. Our third nominee, Crazy on You by Heart. Just keeps going, people. Our fourth nominee, Queen with Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't think it's even a question that Bohemian Rhapsody is the greatest song in the history of Queen. We talked about the great vocals. We talked about the great guitar jam. We talked about the iconic moment in Wayne's World. It's got to be Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. And finally, the great guitarist, the legendary Sweaty Teddy the Nuge with Stranglehold. His, by far, best song. 5 legendary bands, 5 legendary performers. And these are their best songs ever. And the winner is the ultimate Sophie's choice. How can you pick one of these 5? But this is what I have to do. So I'm going to do it. Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. Listen, folks, you can pick any of these songs and you'd be picking one of the greatest songs of all time. But Led Zeppelin is one of the greatest bands of all time. And again, this is their definitive song. Had to go with Kashmir. Now, the Grammys that year did not nominate Kashmir. They did not nominate Bohemian Rhapsody, Stranglehold, going back into our heavy metal category. They did not nominate Symptom of the Universe or Catch the Rainbow. No. That year, the award went to Judy Collins for Send in the Clowns. The only clowns around here are the Grammy judges. How does this song become Song of the Year in that list? You know what it beat out? Captain and Tennille. Glenn Campbell with Rhinestone Cowboy. We're still on the Glenn Campbell kick. If you've been watching the series, the Grammys love Glenn Campbell. What the hell? Glenn Campbell, Judy Collins. This is just absolute nonsense. I just listed off 10 of the greatest songs you're ever going to hear, and not one of them got nominated. You know, I think the reason I'm making these videos is not just to point out how great the music was each of these years, but how idiotic the Grammy Awards were every single year. They never get it right. They never even get close to being right. Well, let's see how they did with Best Metal Album of the Year. Our first nominee, Aerosmith, with Toys in the Attic. I believe that this is the best Aerosmith album of all time. If not the best, it's got to be at least in the top 3. It has 2 of their greatest hits, and really 2 of the greatest hits in the history of rock and roll, in Sweet Emotion and Walk This Way. But don't sleep on the title track. It's also very good. One of the fastest, heaviest songs in the Aerosmith catalog. And if you want a good deep track off this album, Adam's Apple is one of my favorite Aerosmith songs. Hilarious. And speaking of hilarious, there's not a song better than Big 10-Inch Record. Love this album. Aerosmith with Toys in the Attic. Now, typically I nominate mostly studio albums because, live albums can be a little bit of a cheat code because of the fact that they're usually, a greatest hits album disguised in a live format. And that is the case here. But when an album reaches that iconic level, it's got to go in the list. Our second nominee, Kiss, Alive. This album is the album that broke Kiss. Kiss had put out 3 very good studio albums that had not really gone very far. In fact, not only that, they were on a studio label by the name of Casablanca that was known more for their disco, and they didn't know what to do with Kiss. They didn't know how to promote Kiss. So you have this disco label not knowing what to do, and you have Kiss, their production on the first 3 studio albums is a little bit iffy. Not only is Kiss about to go broke, their record label's about to go broke. They needed a Hail Mary. This album changed rock and roll forever because this album took Kiss into the stratosphere. So it has to be on the list. Kiss, Alive. Our third nominee, Hair of the Dog by Nazareth. I love the band Nazareth, but make no mistake, this is by far their greatest album. And again, it just has hit after hit. Not only does it have the title track, Hair of the Dog, but it has probably their biggest hit, Love Hurts. But I like the real bangers on here. I like the songs like Miss Misery. I like the songs like Changing Times. I like Beggar's Day. This album goes way beyond anything Nazareth has done to date, and quite frankly will ever do. It is an absolute Hall of Fame album. Our third nominee, Hair of the Dog by Nazareth. Our fourth nominee, Rainbow with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Again, I agree with Ritchie. This is what Deep Purple should have sounded like. This is straight ahead, hard rock, heavy metal. This takes it to, a new level. Man on the Silver Mountain, very Smoke on the Waterish, really an iconic riff to start the album off. We have the beautiful ballad Catch the Rainbow, but you've got other great songs. Many people love the song Temple of the King. It's kind of one of those cult classics, 16th century Greensleeves. The list goes on and on. I'll give you another deep track on this one, Self-Portrait, also really good. Our fourth nominee, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. And finally, our fifth and final nominee, Ted Nugent with his first solo album, Ted Nugent. Much like all these others, tremendous album, obviously. Great competition this year. Ted Nugent's going to go on and have bigger commercial successes, but I'll go on the mat to say that he never had another album that was this consistently good amongst all the tracks. We talk about it. This is one of those. It's a perfect album where every song is good, blends in perfectly, and it really gives you an insight into the great guitar has arrived, because the guitar playing on this album is legendary. Our fifth and final nominee, Ted Nugent. And the winner is... stealing a little thunder from last week's episode. You wanted the best. Well, you've got it. The hottest band in the land, Kiss. Our winner, Best Heavy Metal Album of the Year, Kiss Alive. Now, again, it might be a little bit controversial, but this album changed the trajectory of Kiss, changed the trajectory of rock and roll, and quite frankly, changed the trajectory of this guy. This was the album that set it on fire and turned Kiss from a almost bankrupt band to one of the most commercially successful bands of all time. Whatever was wrong with those first three albums, they fixed it here. Because not only are these the definitive versions, they are absolute, one after another, perfect versions of these songs. You got Deuce, you got Strutter, you got Come On and Love Me, you got Firehouse, you got Hotter Than Hell, you've got Come On and Love Me, you've got Parasite. I'm not going to go through the whole list. This is a double-length album that is perfect. And while we're on the subject, one more song I'm going to talk about. Black Diamond is maybe the best Kiss song, but the live version of it is definitely the best Kiss song. This is an epic, epic album, and it had to be the winner here. Now, Album of the Year for the Grammys, we talked about him a little bit earlier. Paul Simon with 50, 60, 70 ways to leave your lover. I don't know what's going on. 70 ways to leave Art Garfunkel, I guess. Again, I'm a big mark for Simon and Garfunkel. Never really cared much for Paul Simon as a solo act. So move over. Album of the Year across the board. It's going to go to Kiss as well. Now, maybe you figured out why. I've left Newcomer of the Year for the very last category. Let's get to it. Our final category is Newcomer of the Year. We usually lead with Newcomer of the Year because it's usually probably the least controversial of all the categories. What we've had in the past is we've had a band come on the scene like Zeppelin or Sabbath and just sweep all the awards. Or we've had bands that fought it out, really two pretty good bands that came on, but really didn't make that big of an impact. But as I was putting this list together, I realized we have three really strong nominees. And all three of them have already won a Grammy tonight. So let's talk about the three real quick. Ted Nugent, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, he shows up on the stage with his first solo album, Ted Nugent. Well, he won for Best Musical Performance, Stranglehold. Heart shows up, oh my goodness, one of my favorite bands of all time. Ann and Nancy bringing the band together. they won a Grammy for Best Female Vocalist of the Year. And finally, you have Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. They won Best Metal Song with Catch the Rainbow. And there's a slew of nominations here, including Ted Nugent and Rainbow for Album of the Year. Again, we've had some competition in the past, but I've never seen 3 different newcomers all winning Grammys in different categories. What a loaded field. So who's Newcomer of the Year? Another Sophie's Choice. If you knew how much I liked Rainbow, you'd know how hard this was. But Newcomer of the Year has to be Ted Nugent, because his first album, Back To, it's a perfect album. And while Rainbow is going to go on and have some great albums, we'll be talking about them again, this is that definitive Ted Nugent album, in my opinion. I remember getting this. Again, this is now you're looking at my childhood. I'm getting Ted Nugent in real time and getting this album and just being blown away by all the wonderful hits on this song. So Newcomer of the Year, well deserved, and what a battle. Ted Nugent. And that wraps up 1975. But before you go, let's just say what a great year 1975 was by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ring the bell. We're going to be doing this each and every week. We're going to go through each and every year of the Grammys and talking about the hard rock and heavy metal that should be rewarded. And if you've been following this series, you know every year the music's getting a little better and a little better. We're going to just keep on moving. It's just going to keep getting better, folks. So you don't want to miss an episode. So subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, give me a thumbs up, and help the channel out. Also, we do this thing live every Tuesday. So if you've never tuned in, come in on Tuesday nights and join us. We're a small but mighty group that talks about all things hard rock and heavy metal. But until then, take care.